Says I'm live. Oh, there we go. I got a counter going. Cool. All right. Welcome back. This is part 2. I'm just going to pick up where I left off. I had a pretty nice interaction with a customer just now. Look at oh, Matthew, you need a haircut. All right. So let's go back to old, generally less drivetrain wear. So what do I mean by that? I mean like your chain, your freewheel, or your cassette, or in the case of a mid-drive with like an internally geared hub, the wear on that hub in the back. Generally speaking, you're going to wear through on a mid-drive bike, especially if it doesn't have a throttle, which a lot of them don't. You're going to wear through the chain at something similar to the rate you would on a regular bike. Maybe even a little bit faster. I'm speculating there, but it would make sense just because the motor puts more torque on the crank than or the chain ring or whatever than your foot does. My evidence, I haven't read that anywhere. I would argue that that's probably true, just because like a motor literally goes faster than your legs. That's why people want I'll try to sit up straighter. That's generally why people want the e-bikes, right? Is they want to go faster. So what's the effect of that? So on the mid drive, because you're talking about the mid drive now, because you're still using the whole drivetrain. You're still using your chain ring, your chain, and your cogs on the back. You're still going to wear through those parts pretty quickly. With the hub drive, because when the motor is spinning, your chain, your freewheel, your crank, your chain ring, they're all basically just hanging out, especially if you use your throttle. But even if you're using the pedal assist, once you're spinning out, like once the motor's going faster than you're pedaling, you're really not putting any wear on that chain and the gears, and so those parts do last longer. So there's kind of trade-offs here. It's not as simple as one being more expensive or one being cheaper. Generally, your mid drive is going to be more expensive up front. Your hub drive is going to be less expensive up front. When you get a flat on a mid drive bike, you might be able to get it fixed for like a normal flat fix rate. On a hub drive bike, I like to tell people just kind of like how to think about going into a bike shop and like what other people owe you and what you owe other people. You might be able to trick a mechanic into taking in a flat fix on a hub motor at the normal rate. But you kind of fuck that guy over because it's going to be like a lot more work. And so they're not really going to get paid for the amount of work that they're going to do. And if they're just like an hourly employee and the boss who's like, stressing out about like what this employee is costing me versus what they're bringing in, over the course of like an hour of their work, them doing a bunch of difficult work and only charging you, for an easier job than what they actually did. It's kind of bad for the business. You're setting people up for failure. So if you have a hub motor bike and you get a flat fix on that hub motor, I think you should move through the world with the expectation that this is a hard thing to fix and it's going to cost more money. Therefore, it's going to take more time. It's going to be harder on the person's body. That costs more money. And then so mile over mile, especially if you're getting a lot of flats, you are going to spend more money on that hub drive bike. But then generally you're going to spend less money on like the chain, the freewheel and stuff, just because they're not going to wear quite as quickly. And I definitely have done some tune-ups on people's bikes that have like kind of a lot of miles on them, and you'd be surprised. Like they wear through brake pads pretty fast, and both of these bikes are going to wear through brake pads pretty fast just because it's a big heavy thing. It goes fast. That translates into wearing your brake pads faster than on a non-electric bike. But I've seen some people who have like a lot of miles. They have like thousands of miles, where I would expect them on a regular bike to need a new chain. I would expect them on a mid-drive bike to need a new chain, but their chain is still good, just because the the way the mechanism works, where your acceleration is happening kind of behind the chain or kind of, after the chain in a way. So that's pretty much it. To review, we've mapped the bike industry into bicycles and e-bikes. And then talking specifically about e-bikes, we broke those down into two categories: the mid-drive bike, and then the hub drive bike. Mid-drive meaning your motor's at your bottom bracket or at your crank. Hub drive meaning it's in the wheel, specifically in the center of the wheel. One I skipped is the friction drive, which actually has something that rolls against the tire that spins it. Those are not great. They're skip them. I intentionally left them out. Let's keep. I didn't intentionally leave it out. With full honesty, I forgot them, but I'm leaving them out now intentionally because it just complicates things. And there are actually purpose-built bikes with those, but generally that's an aftermarket conversion kit kind of thing, and they're not very good. But they exist. If you want to look up friction drive, feel free. You're on the internet already. Just Google it. But yeah, so those are the two big differences. And then some big things to consider. Generally, you're going to spend more money up front for that mid drive, generally less for the hub drive. There are exceptions to that in both cases. With the mid drive, you're generally going to have a normal bicycle wheel. With the hub drive, you have a motor wheel necessarily. That's what defines it. And it's just a heavier, harder thing to work on when you need repair. And then with the hub drive, please only get ones with a rear wheel motor. And then generally you will wear through your drivetrain parts at the same rate as a regular bicycle with the mid drive, maybe even a little bit faster. And then with the hub drive, generally you'll wear through those parts a little bit slower. So that's our main breakdown there. And then what I wanted to do next, see how we are on time. I wanted to cut, I think I was at about 30 minutes last time. So I've got about 23 minutes to go on this one still. So e-bike parts is what we're going to do next. Is that showing up there? Awesome. So this is specifically what's on an e-bike that's not on a regular bicycle, right? So first of all, we have a motor that provides the rotational force, which is called torque, makes bike go faster. Obviously, that's essential. And then I guess we should say specifically an electric motor. Okay, then we're going to have a motor controller, which is also sometimes called a programmable logic controller. Is that right? PLC? PLC stands for programmable logic controller. Dope. I did a Google in a separate tab. Nobody saw but me. And this is essentially the brain of the bike. Essentially, you're going to have signals sent. It's a little more complicated than this. I'm going to add some other parts to this later. Let me pull this up so I can see myself and see if my gestures are on screen or not. But so you have inside the motor, I don't have taken apart one here to show you, but you have basically a magnets and then coiled copper. And so you send most motors, they're more complicated than this, but you have 3 controller wires going in, and I think you have 3 distinct coils in there. But I don't really know. If you take it apart and look at it, it looks like spaghetti. But I think those are separate coils in there, but they're all kind of interwoven into each other. And then you're sending, and hey, if you know more about this than me and you want to correct me, jump in. I have an English degree. I have a BA in English and then an MA in nonprofit management. I've learned what I know about electric motors from working in bike shops. And then I tried to get an AA or an AS, an Associate of Science, either an Associate of Arts or Associate of Science from PCC, the local community college here. And they really did not make it easy. They say very clearly that they want to work with non-traditional students, but their campus is way outside of town, and they, as quickly as they could, transitioned away from like remote classes, and they really made it very hard for me to continue as a student there. But I got, after like 3 years of trying, I have about close to like the first year of classes done. And so I learned a little bit there. But basically, you're sending an electrical charge into the copper wiring, and then that repels the magnets, right? And that makes it spin. The magnets get repelled from the electrical charge in the copper, and that makes them spin. And then you're just sending different signals at different times to regulate the spinning of the motor. So the programmable logic controller, it's taking signals back and forth from the motor, the speed reader, the cadence sensor, the torque sensor, whatever. I'll get into those in a minute. The throttle, if you have one. And it's telling them, it's going back and forth and doing like quick computations to say like, this is the signal I need to send. 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 And sending it out there, which creates for you, the rider, a consistent delivery of power that keeps you moving forward. So that's essentially what your controller is. Generally, people will just call it the controller in bike shops. But like elsewhere in the electronics industry, I think it's often called a PLC, and I often call it the motor controller, but I don't know if that's just me, to be honest. But that's that, and they look very different. The motor is going to generally have like two forms. To go back to our last slide, it's either going to be the mid drive or the hub drive. The controllers, when I'm talking about form, I mean literally like the shape of the thing. It can really look a bunch of different ways. Some of them are external, and you can like look at the bike and see it. On some of the rad bikes, you can point at it. On the rad wagon, it's this little black box about yay big, maybe more like yay big. It's external to the bike. It's very obvious where it is. People might not know what it is, but once you know to like look for it, you're like, oh, there's my motor controller. On some other bikes, it's like hidden kind of deep inside the frame. I think on some bikes, I don't know for sure, but there's some like there are like plug and play. There's a business that went out of business. Oh, I got a delivery. Yeah, 1 second. Ooh. Hey, dude. I don't even know what this is.
What are you?
What? Cool. That's me.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too. Oh, I know what this is. This is for a customer. Hey, if you have issues with your rad power bike, I'm the guy. I know how to get the parts. I know how to fix them. Hit me up, upcyclespdx.com. Send a text, 503-908-3569. Send an email. Get in touch. I'm your guy. I got parts. I got them coming in all day, every day. But anyway, back on topic. Yeah. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So there was a product, you can find it if you Google it. It was called the Copenhagen Wheel. That, I believe, was pretty much like a plug and play. You just put it on your bike. Now it worked with like a phone app, and they did some goofy things that made it like really hard for shops to service it. It used instead of like a J-bend spoke, it used a U-shaped spoke that was threaded on both ends. And like if you're crafty and you have a spoke machine, you can make one of those out of like any spoke. But it's not if you don't have a spoke machine, and like Upcycles doesn't. We will, but we currently don't. It's a pretty weird thing. And I think they had some other issues. I think because I think you had to like have the app like live for it to work. I don't really know. I never used one of these, but I've worked on bikes that had them on them. And it was like a conversion kit, but I think that had the controller and maybe the battery in the motor. But anyway, so like there is stuff like that, but generally your motor and your controller are going to be separate parts. That's going to be the standard for the industry. And then different bikes will have different things, but you will have some sort of either cadence sensor or torque sensor. This is for pedal assist, which to my knowledge, generally speaking, in places that have a law about e-bikes, they all are pedal assist. There are the California law that I believe is also the Washington law and will be the Oregon law at some point, but I don't know when. Created 3 categories, class 1, class 2, class 3, pretty easy. Class 1, 20 miles per hour without a throttle. How does that work? It has pedal assist, meaning you have to pedal the bike for the motor to assist you. Class 2, 20 miles per hour with a throttle, but I believe, I could be wrong, I believe all of those bikes are also pedal assist, at least like by default from the factory. If you know one out there that's an exception to that, let me know. And then class 3, 28 miles per hour, no throttle, necessarily a pedal assist. But so, and I talked about this in the last video, but just to reiterate quickly, basically cadence assist, all your controller is going to know is that you're pedaling. And if you want the motor to do more work, you turn up the level of assist. If you want to do less work, you turn down the level of assist. You can turn it down all the way to off on some bikes, and like still have your throttle going if it's class 2. But it doesn't know, like if you push harder on the pedal, it doesn't change how much work the motor does. And on some of them, I believe you can like maybe most of them. I haven't played with this enough. I think on some of them you can pedal it backwards and it'll kick the motor on, and on some of them you can't. But like, so you could, I mean, you can on those bikes, like go to your lowest gear. So you're like, you pedal very little and it starts spinning out, but it still knows that you're pedaling. So it'll keep accelerating the motor. The torque sensor, it's actually reading how much force you're putting into that pedal. And so with that, the motor will kind of match what you give it. So if you want to go slower, you just pedal softer and the motor will actually slow down. If you want to go faster, you push harder with your leg and the motor will speed up. Generally feels more intuitive. The torque sensor versus the cadence sensor feels a little bit more like how a normal bike behaves on the road. You know, on a normal bike, I push harder, the bike goes faster. I push softer, the bike goes slower. So to me, it's like a more natural feeling, but it's actually a more complicated mechanism. You know, the cadence sensors, you have a normal bottom bracket. Talking about the cadence sensor here, you have a normal bottom bracket, and then your cadence sensing is external to that. And there's different ones. Sometimes it's really just like a speed reader on your crank. Speed reader I'm using from like the old style bicycle computer kind of thing. It's just it's reading that you're moving basically. And then the torque sensor, it's like a special bottom bracket that has like wires that go into it. You know, you're going to buy a purpose-built e-bike in theory, so you're not really going to have to mess with it. But like as a mechanic, it's a more complicated thing. But yeah, generally higher costs on the torque sensor, lower cost on the cadence sensor. But in either case, you know, like this tells the controller, I call it the PLC for brevity's sake, because I want it to fit into this space. Tells PLC you are moving, and then it might tell it more than that. Like if you have the cadence sensor, it's really just telling it that you're moving. If you have the torque sensor, it's telling you like how hard you're pushing and stuff, and then it's using that in its little brain and its little calculations to tell the motor what to do. And then throttle, that's going to be on class 2 only if you're in a place where this is regulated. And essentially like tells the motor go. And there's like a degree of analog to them. I bet some are just like on and off, but generally like you can kind of on the rad powers like twist the throttle a little bit and it'll just go a little bit, twist it hard and it's going to quickly accelerate. But it's pretty subtle, and in practice on the road, you're pretty much just going to turn it off. And then they're not all going to have exactly this part, but rads for sure have this. Let's say rad power. Have a part called the wiring harness. And this is essentially like a bundle of connectors and then what I think are basically shunts. There's like these little boxes on them. I have one. I replaced one with somebody recently. So this is one I replaced, and on the bike, it's going to be like kind of laced through everything and wired out. I bundled it like this just to make it easy, and then I actually threw it in the recycling bin. Generally, rad power, if you're having a controller issue, they're going to want you to replace the wiring harness as well. Basically, because what can happen is you can get like an unusual current draw, and it can like fry the controller. Is I think what's going on most of the time, but it could also damage the wiring harness. So too much current is no good. And then so they'll generally tell you to replace the wiring harness as well as the controller. But so this is, you can kind of see there. So we've got a yellow connector. That's, and we've got one there too. So one of these, and right now I'm not sure which is which, but if I took it apart, I could figure it out, but it doesn't matter. One of them goes to your cadence sensor. One of them goes to your throttle, which are both things that tell the bike go, right? This is from a cadence sensing bike. And there are 3-pin yellow connectors. A lot of the e-bike stuff, all those different brands I talked about last week, a lot of it is plug and play. A lot of it has become standardized. So a lot of it you could, as far as I know, take a cadence sensor off of one bike, put it on another. Somebody else might tell you not to do that. I haven't done enough experimentation to say, but you will see a lot of these same things. This is a rad power part. You will see very similar stuff on other bikes. Then we have these 2-pin red connectors. Those are for your brake cutoffs. This 4-pin connector, that goes to your tail light, I believe. And then, yeah, that goes to your tail light. And then it has 4 pins instead of just 2. The light would often just need 2, but that's because it's on, so it has like its power, and then it also gets brighter when you hit the brakes. So it's taking signals from your brake cutoffs in addition to just power. So it has the 4 pins, and then I actually skipped. There's actually 3 of the 2-pin red connectors because one is for your headlight, which doesn't change brightness when you stop. Then there's this green one. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I forget what the green one does, but it's one of them. And then this more complicated black, like multi-pin one, I believe that's the one that goes to your motor controller. What the hell is the green one? Oh, the green one is the display. The green one's the display. And then I think, and then I've got 2 more of these. So none of them go to your battery. The battery goes directly to the controller. I think one might, no, I'm thinking about this though, because the motor just goes to the controller. I forget why you have 2 of these on it no, I don't. One, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not coming to me quick enough. Basically, when you're putting it on, you match them up. It's pretty obvious. But when I'm looking at it removed from the bike, my brain is not catching up quick enough. But anyway, maybe they both go to your controller somehow. But anyway, and then there's these like 2 boxes here. I think these are essentially shunts. They're like changing the voltage of the signal in there is what's going on there. There's other words for that, but I learned the word shunt. Maybe you can hear me drop that on the thing at some point in the past. But so that's what that is. But it's regulating voltage a little bit and sending the right signals to where they need to go. And then let's come back here. So that's pretty much it for like e-bike specific parts. Everything else on them, generally speaking, oh, well, no, I forgot. The display and or the remote. So the display is like the little screen, excuse me, that on different bikes is going to show you different things. But it's pretty common for them to show you like what level of assist that you're in. Let's get my hand on screen. There we go. What level of assist are you in? How fast are you going? How much battery charge do you have left? Trip distance or like overall odometer, like overall miles traveled. It might on the Bosch bikes, it has like a little wrench icon. I don't know why I'm doing this hand signal. I don't know. I actually don't have a wrench. I have a torque wrench, but it's not right. But we don't have like a little wrench icon that shows up that means like get to the bike shop. Little secret about those, as far as I know, those basically it's not like a car where it's sensed an issue. It actually is just like it was set to like turn on when you hit like 2,000 miles or something, and so you've hit 2,000 miles, so it turned on. And at the bike shop, they're going to do whatever they do to the bike. If you're not having any electrical issues, they're just going to do like mechanical maintenance, and then they go in and turn the wrench icon off and set it to turn back on at a certain mileage. But anyway, that's your display, and then that's like the user-facing display. You could also call this the UI, and then the remote. Well, actually, this is all the UI. UI stands for user interface. And then the remote is like the thing with the buttons on it that you push. And on some bikes, these are may or may not be separate parts. On some bikes, these are one part. On some bikes, they're two parts. Like a lot of the Rad Power bikes have the display like in the middle of the handlebar, and then the remote is over on the left-hand side. So you're turning your speed up and down. The buttons that you push are over here on the left-hand side, and then your display is there in the middle. So like using the analogy of a computer, the display is your monitor, and the remote is like the mouse or the keyboard or the trackpad or whatever the hell. So that's pretty much it. More or less everything else you're going to find on e-bikes is what's on regular bikes. I guess we could get into how much time do I have? We got like 5 minutes, and then let's do a quick e-bike specific stats or specs. Specs meaning specifications. So you'll have like power, which is generally measured in watts, and in electrical notation, P equals I times V. Current times voltage is how they get the power of the motor. A lot of people are just, for whatever reason, because of like their own, when I say a lot of people, trigger warning, I specifically mean men. A lot of men are, have a very fragile masculinity, and they need to be like the most powerful. Otherwise, like, I don't know, the other men around them will like get the whiff of beta off of them, and then, I don't know, damage them in the marketplace or whatever. I don't really know what the fear is there. I've been this little wiener my whole life. I've never been like a tough guy, so I don't even care. But like a lot of male customers get like really caught up in like the wattage of the bike, and they want, so like the Rad Power bikes, they're almost all 750 watts, and then like you can find bikes out there that are like 1,000 watts, or you can find ridiculous things out there. And like if that's you, go with God. I don't give a shit, man. I don't care. And like we talked last week about that Solterra 2 bike. It has a 350-watt motor, so it's substantially smaller than a 750-watt motor, right? That bike goes 20 miles per hour just fine. It gets up there pretty fast. There's really no value in getting like a high wattage motor. And then so I'm going to put that personal opinion. This doesn't matter. It literally does in that like it's going to change like how the machine works or whatever. But I think you should, if you're like a normal person who's not like a weird man baby who's trying to like assert your masculinity over the other men around you. And like, first of all, dude, you're riding an e-bike. Like if you're tough, ride a regular bike, you baby. Like, so it's already stupid. Or like you've already compromised on like your personal like physical toughness, and then like, well, my bike is somehow a surrogate for my body, I guess. I'm getting way into like sociological stuff that has nothing to do with like the technical side of bicycles, but it's my live stream. I can do whatever I want. This is how I feel about this. This stuff is stupid. I'm really not sympathetic to the middle-aged man who wants like the most wattage possible on their e-bike. You have a whole set of concerns that I don't share, and it doesn't matter. Please don't overthink the wattage of the bike. Please do not have it in your head that more watts is better. It's not true. Honestly, I think like 250 watts is probably fine. I'm just saying that number. 300. Let's make it 350. Because that's what I know is on. Because I just looked at it last week, and that's what I know is on that Solterra 2 from Aventon, and that bike goes plenty fast. It has plenty of giddy up. The generally a heavier bike in order to get that same feeling of acceleration is going to have more wattage. But and there is, I believe, some translation of this into horsepower. I don't know what it is, and I don't care. I'm not a car person. I think all cars suck, even yours. And I'm just not a part of that world, so it just doesn't matter to me. But that's one you'll see. And then top speed. And then I am very much a proponent of 20 is plenty. So when I ride a non-electric bike, like around the city, when I'm going hard, I doubt I'm rarely over 15 miles per hour. Probably sometime, right? You can get it going, and you can, like my wife and I have a tandem, and I don't have a speed reader on that, but like when we truck on that thing, I'm sure we're blowing past 20 miles per hour on it. But you're not going to do speeds like that on a regular bicycle. 20 miles per hour is fast enough to make you feel like you're going pretty fast on a bike. And you're literally like floating through space out in the world. And if you crash that thing and hit the ground, and so I've heard different numbers on this. I actually think 20 might be a little bit faster than they should go, but this is this like stupid American culture where everyone like associates like speed with like efficiency and money and good and capitalism. Is like the faster I'm going, the closer I get to God or whatever. So people want to go fast. That's fine. Do your thing. 20 is very fast, and it's fast enough that when you if you fall and hit the ground, you're probably not going to feel too good, but you're very likely to get up and walk away. You get to speeds faster than that, 25, the likelihood of you getting up and walking away goes down. At like 30, the likelihood that you do not stand up from that trip is like pretty high. I can get deeper into those numbers for real in another episode of this if I, in another live stream if I feel so inclined. But again, people get like really into like, because you can find an e-bike that goes like 50 miles an hour. They exist online. They're not street legal. You shouldn't buy them, but you can find them. And people get like attached to that as like, I don't know, better, faster is better. That's not my world. I'm not going to help you make your bike go faster than its intended speed or anything like that, but it's a common stat out there. Let's get this off of bold. AH, I believe, is the abbreviation for amp hours, and I think it's usually written like that. Capital A, lowercase h. Ampere hours, AH, are a unit of electrical charge that measures how much current a battery can supply over a period of time. So another way of thinking about this, I'm going to call it what I called it, which is not, they said ampere, but I'm going to just say amp. This is essentially a measure of your battery capacity. And basically, more amp hours means on one charge, you will get more time, like more usage out of it, assuming the same voltage. I'm not actually totally clear as of this conversation as to how how voltage is really going to affect your charge quickly. I really don't know, but like 48 volts is really common, and that's kind of all I want to say about voltage. But I'm really only throwing the volts in there because you will see it, and because I made this reference to voltage in my comment about amp hours. But basically, like Rad right now has they have their newer batteries that they just introduced this year over the previous battery, and it has more amp hours, and so literally you can get more charge. On the old batteries, I think they're I'm just going to say some numbers. Let's say the old one is 13 amp hours and the new one is 16 amp hours or whatever. So those new batteries, they say 60 miles plus per charge. On the old ones, they say 48 miles plus per charge. And really the difference there is just more amp hours. How do they get the more amp hours? They literally put more cells in the battery. And so it's literally a heavier battery is your trade-off there. Somebody who knows more about electricity than me might have a more nuanced understanding of that, but that's good enough. And then where's some other bike specific stats and specs? Your wattage, your top speed, your amp hours, your voltage. Maybe those are the big ones. I'm trying to think. I'm going to cut it off there. The other things that are coming to mind feel like a stretch to me. That's pretty much it. We're over my time goal, so we're good. But then just to reiterate, I'm breaking the bicycle industry down into bicycles and e-bikes. Among e-bikes, I break those down into mid-drive and hub drive, meaning where your motor is located. Mid-drive, it's in the middle of the bike, specifically at the crank or bottom bracket. The hub drive, it's in the motor. Specifically, we want to see it in the rear wheel. Please do not buy a bike with a front hub motor. You have a heavy motor wheel is the biggest downside to the hub drive. You get a normal bicycle wheel on the mid drive is the big benefit to that. Generally, these will be less expensive. Generally, these will be more expensive. But with the harder repair, let's say, for that, and then easier repair. For that, a flat tire is probably the most common bicycle repair issue. So, a flat tire makes your bike unrideable. So it's pretty relevant. And then generally you're going to spend more money up front on this, less money up front on this, but you might be spending more on those flats, especially if you're getting them a lot and you're not doing it yourself. And then generally this will wear your drivetrain less, and the hub drive will wear your drivetrain less. And then the mid drive will wear your drivetrain more. And then some e-bike specific parts. You have the motor, which provides your go. You have the motor controller. That's basically the brain of the motor. is most often a separate part from the motor. Then you have your pedal assist, either a cadence sensor or a torque sensor that tells it that you're moving. And in the case of the torque sensor, it tells you how hard you're pushing. Then you may also have a throttle if it's a class 2 bike, which basically just tells your motor to go. Some bikes will have like a part called the wiring harness, which is just like your bundle of wires. On some other bikes, it's basically all of the parts kind of go together. I skipped brake cutoffs. Which is an e-bike specific thing. Brake motor cutoffs. These are the wires. As I was going through that wiring harness, I commented on these and I forgot to add them to here. So your brake motor cutoffs are wires that come out of your brakes that tells the bike you're using the brake. And so therefore, even if I'm still pedaling or even if I'm hitting the throttle, the motor's not going to turn on. That's very important. You want that feature on your e-bike. You can find e-bikes that don't have this. Please, for the love of God, don't buy these. I'm actually we'll get into it another time because I'm over time now anyway. But you want your motor to turn off when you actuate the brake. You don't want your brakes fighting an open throttle. You want the brakes to just have to fight the existing inertia in the bike. You don't want to have to fight the inertia plus the motor continuing to try to accelerate you. That's very important. And you will find some older, cheaper e-bikes that don't have these. And then just also adding, most e-bikes will come with lights that are powered off of the battery rather than in old school bikes. You're either going to have a dynamo hub if you have like a cool, nice bike that turns your light on, or you're going to have lights that are either powered by batteries that are inside the light, or where they have like a rechargeable lithium ion battery in it, where they might literally have alkaline batteries that you remove and reinstall with fresh ones when they die. And then there's other lighting things out there, but I just wanted to mention that. And then your user interface, which will be a display, and it might also have a separate like remote that's like the buttons you push with your hand. And then some specific stats, your power, which is measured in watts. Personally, I don't think you need the most wattage. I would advise against getting too hung up on that. Your top speed, again, 20 is enough. I really want you want a 28 mile per hour bike, you want a 50 mile per hour bike, a 40 mile per hour bike, whatever. Go with God. More speed means like you'll literally get where you're going faster. It also means when you crash, and I'm sorry, bikes crash, cars crash, planes crash, boats crash, trains crash. I just learned this yesterday. The trains like several trains derail in the United States like every day. That one in Ohio made the news when that happened because it spewed, it created the toxic airborne event. But we like 1,000 trains derail like every year. But anyway, vehicles crash. It's built into the thing. It's part of what they do. You are taking a risk when you accelerate the human body beyond the speed it was meant to go. Also people walking just like trip, and in extreme cases, people just like trip and die. Like you can get hurt moving. It's just part of the deal. The faster you're going as you're flying through the air, the more likely you are to suffer like permanent injury, serious injury, up to and including death. 20 miles per hour, good top speed. I really want to push it beyond that. 15, I think also a good top speed, but you won't find many e-bikes that top out at 20 or at 15 currently. Maybe I could create the market for it. I don't know. And then amp hours and voltage. Really all I want to say about it is you have voltage. I don't want to get into Ohm's law, but there's like a water metaphor. And sort of like your voltage is kind of like how I think of it is sort of like the volume of your water, and then current measured in amps is like how fast your water is moving, kind of. So like high volts seem more dangerous, right? But not if it's at a very low amp. It's not such a big deal. Where like even a relatively low volt at a very high amp, right? That's like If you walk into a large object slowly, you'll be fine. But like a bullet, a very tiny object that moves very fast, you will not be okay. So amps are like the more dangerous one in terms of like the water metaphor or whatever. I guess I use the large object metaphor, like the moving object metaphor, rather than just water, because the water one never quite worked for me. But you get the idea there. I am really getting off on tangents that I'm probably just confusing everybody. But the important thing here is you will see amp hours, usually measured in AH. That's a reference to your battery capacity. Also means heavier battery. But basically, more amp hours, you will get more miles per charge out of that battery. But it also literally means it's like a bigger, heavier battery. Cool. I think that's everything. Nobody watched me. That's awesome. I had an interruption. This is part 2. Check out part 1. I put the link in the description. And thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.